I'm actually not disappointed with the International Court of Justice's ruling that it delivered on Friday on the emergency measures requested by South Africa, in regards to the genocide case against the settler state of Israel on what it's doing in Gaza. Actually, I'm more disappointed that many people are actually disappointed, and especially when it comes to Muslims. In fact, I'm even more disappointed that even after this disappointment, there are many people out there who are trying to cling on to this ruling as some sort of victory. Even if it's a small victory, we're seeing this. But in reality, if we examine the ICJ ruling closely, read between the lines, we will find that there is actually something fishy going on, something shady, dare I say it, something sinister. And it's this sinister agenda that we will be covering in today's episode, inshallah ta'ala. So if you want to know more, then stay tuned. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. You're listening to the Muslim Podcaster Show. I'm your host, Majid, and today I'm joined by my guest, member of the Voice of the Ummah team, brother JK. Assalamu alaikum, JK, and welcome to the show.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. How's it going, brother? Maj, Muslim podcaster. I don't know what you want me to call you, but yeah, how's it going? You good?
Alhamdulillah, I'm well, bro. I'm well. I hope the same for you.
Alhamdulillah, good, alhamdulillah.
We'll inshallah get into it because
Yeah.
I'm sure people want to know what is this sinister agenda, what's at play, right? But before we start, to all those, especially if you're new to the show, please subscribe and hit the like button. So, brother JK, I came across a video of yours which you posted on the Voice of the Ummah Telegram channel, where you were claiming, I'll say claiming at this stage, that the ICJ ruling is in line with US interests. Now, I'm sure that most people who are watching this podcast, listening to it, are thinking, how the hell is the ICJ ruling in line with US interests? This sounds like a conspiracy theory. But that's why, to be honest with you, I've asked you to come onto the show because I want you to elaborate more on this. Because I feel that, on Friday there was disappointment because of no call for a ceasefire. But actually, alhamdulillah, and credit to many people out there who actually picked up, like, wait a minute, it's not even just about a ceasefire. If you actually look at what's being said,
Yeah.
actually, there's no change. In fact, this is as they would say, as James Bond would say, this is a license to kill.
Yeah.
Right? So, inshallah, over to you, bro. How is
Yeah.
this in line with the US agenda?
Yeah, a good question, and I'm glad. Thanks for having me on to elaborate on that video. I only posted it earlier today, so it's fresh in my mind, and I'm sure even the ICJ ruling is fresh in lots of people's minds. And like you said, there was an element of disappointment, which is quite surprising. Yeah, and I think the key point really is that we shouldn't be disappointed. Not because we don't want the situation to improve in Gaza or Palestine. Of course we do. The reason we shouldn't be disappointed is the fact that we should not really expect any outcome from this international court of justice. And yes, absolutely. As you said, this is in line with the American plan, the American interests for that region. And like you said, nothing's really changed. And we need to really, as Muslims, as an ummah, delve into the detail and the depth of things rather than just taking it at face value or just going along with the kind of the core narrative, which is, like you said, the ceasefire not being called. And so I think we can go into it. I think the first thing to really say is that it's good that as Muslims, as activists, we're looking for change. That's a positive sign because, the situation has come so dire and it's affected everybody. It continues to affect everyone on a daily basis. It's been over 100 days since the onslaught. So it's positive that people, Muslims especially, are looking for some sort of change. So, expecting change and wanting change from the ICJ is not a bad sign. It's good, but actually having the hope that there'll be change is probably something that, inshallah, we can now learn from, I think, from this episode of the ruling itself. and we can go forward. I think the other thing worth mentioning is that this isn't really a criticism of South Africa. To be honest, South Africa put a very compelling case, legal case, right? They presented all the evidence, and there's a very large amount of evidence because this genocide has been documented. It's been, there's that saying, the revolution will not be televised. The genocide is being televised, or at least on social media, you can say. I don't know what the terminology is. It's there for everyone to see. So I think the South African legal team did a very good job to bring together all the evidence against Israel. And they used a lot of the things we've seen, the videos that we've seen, and not just the videos, but also the rhetoric from the Israeli MPs, because one of the key things that they're trying to prove, and one of the things that will be difficult, but what they're trying to do is genocide. For genocide to have occurred, it can't just be the actions; it has to also be an intent. There needs to be an intention to commit genocide. And that's the thing that's quite difficult to prove. But in my eye, and from yours, I'm sure, there's been enough intent from the MPs, the right-wing MPs. There's been lots of intent there. So yeah, I think we can go into it a bit more, but I think the key thing is that yes, the ceasefire may not have been called. We shouldn't have expected this. But if you go through each and every single one of the rulings that came out, the verdict that came out, we can see that it is in line with everything that America has been saying. And even though it's an embarrassment for Israel, because it's, the whole world can see it, and that's what people are saying, that even the ruling may not have gone what people wanted, but actually it's an embarrassment for Israel. In fact, it's in line with what America wants. And a lot of people think that America and Israel is fully in cahoots, and everything that Israel is doing, America fully backs. That's the thing it's worth discussing. America is not fully backing what Israel is doing. What it is doing is supporting its colonial outpost or colonial partner in the region. It has to, because the West is basically the lifeblood of Israel. So they cannot be seen to be like enemies of Israel or anything like that. They're friends of Israel, they're supporters of Israel, and they will always publicly support Israel. So you'll see every kind of news conference when it comes to Biden and Kirby and all the kind of main kind of speakers, as well as the UK, Rishi Sunak and their MPs as well. You'll see that they always publicly support Israel and always go back to this one saying that we've heard, and it's becoming boring now, that Israel has a right to defend itself, right? So they will continually do this, and I'm not saying that they don't. They do support that, and they do support the killing as well. They do keep saying that actually they've got a right to defeat Hamas, even if that's possible. However, what I would say is that despite the staunch support of America, of Israel, supporting Israel, they don't support the pathway that Netanyahu and his right-wing government is going along, right? That's the key difference, right? They support the fact that they can defend themselves, but in terms of the pathway that Netanyahu is going on, they don't fully agree. And the key point here is that the US solution for Palestine is a two-state solution, right? We all know that, right? They always have pushed the fact that we need a two-state solution. This is the plan for Palestine and Israel. We don't agree with that, of course, but this is the American stance. However, Netanyahu and his right-wing government and many of the Israelis, they don't want a two-state solution. They don't want a Palestinian state, right? And that's in both word and action, right? So we've seen Netanyahu go to the UN and he showed his map that didn't have Israel. So that in itself was a sign before all this started. That's a sign that Netanyahu has always been against a Palestinian state, right? They want the greater Israel, right? That's always been the case. But even more recently, as now that the war's kind of coming to its close, and we're seeing a few more solutions. Recently, Netanyahu had a discussion with Biden. Afterwards, his office released a statement to say that essentially that they reiterated the policy that after Hamas is destroyed, Israel must retain security control over Gaza and ensure that Gaza will no longer pose a threat to Israel. And they basically said, this is their words, a requirement that contradicts the demand for Palestinian sovereignty. They said that in this statement, right? So this basically is saying that Israel doesn't want a Palestinian state or Palestinian sovereignty. So this goes against the American plan. Likewise, as I said, that's just words, but we've seen it in action as well. So you can see how there's been an ethnic cleansing of Gaza throughout this war, throughout this episode. You've seen that slowly they have been moving and shifting people, displacing people from the north to the south, right? And if you remember the early days, since like in the October, November days, they were talking about, oh, there's a safe area in the south. We want to get rid of the militants here in the north. Therefore, move along the board, move along, go all the way there. It's safe for you to stay. But what's happened and what's transpired is that even if you go there, they're going to start to bomb it. So they bombed northern Gaza continually. People moved, people died, obviously. But now, where they called the safe area, what they called the safe area of Khan Yunis and these places, they're now on an onslaught there, right? And essentially, they want to remove all the people out of Gaza into the Sinai Desert or into Egypt, right? This is their plan. So we can see both in word and in action that Israel is against the state of Palestine and the people of Palestine. They're committing a genocide. They're committing an ethnic cleansing. So this is basically what I'm saying. This goes against the plan for America, and why America has not only been speaking about they've been pressurizing Netanyahu and Israel that they need to stop with kind of the not the killing, but the blatantness of it, and but to do it in a bit more of a quiet way and don't go so brazen about it and talk about it so like as a genocide. And also what they've done is use the ICJ ruling, and this is what my theory is, that everything that's come out of the ICJ is in line with what America wants to do to pressurize Netanyahu and its right-wing government.
So before we go through the points you made on your video about the ICJ ruling, because I think the way you broke it down kind of makes sense. But it's good what you've done is you've kind of laid the backdrop of the fact that look, the US is supporting the Zionist settler state because it's, in its own interests. It's a foreign base in the heart of the Muslim lands for its own interest. In fact, one would say that the Americans are trying to save Israel from itself. Okay. Even though this is the case, we see a clear difference in policy. The fact that the US see that for there to be stability in the region, not for the hope for peace, but because it's in their interest, they see an integrated state of Israel within the region, which is now legitimate. It's accepted by the Arab nations around it. It's accepted even by the Palestinians on the ground, because as soon as they sign the two-state solution, they are giving up their right for right to return. They're giving up their right of resistance. They are no longer refugees, basically, right? So this kind of like rubber stamps now that this is now a legitimate state. So Americans' vision is this is how we're going to solve this issue, and we're going to kill this. We're going to close the Palestinian case, the file once and for all. However, what we've seen from day dot is people like Netanyahu who have said, that I'm the one who stalled the Palestinian state all my years in power, and I will continue doing so. So on the backdrop, that's what we're saying. That's the kind of backdrop. We see that even though on the outside it shows like, we're fully behind you. However, there is a disagreement in moving forward from here.
Yeah, it's a policy disagreement. It's a their plans in terms of their future plans, a longer term plan. That's where we can see a divergence between the Israeli position or the current government's position there, as compared to the US position.
So how is the ICJ ruling then in line with what the US want? And just before I come to that, I wanted to just mention something as well, that even though you mentioned that this is like, the ICJ ruling, the fact that it wasn't thrown out in the first place, like that's what the Zionists were hoping, that the case wasn't just thrown out. People see that as a victory in itself. And that really, you know what that goes to show? I was thinking about this. That goes to show that these Zionists and this state has been so immune from any criticism that the fact that they never threw the case out, actually people are like celebrating. That just goes to show, right, that how normally the normal state of play would be that it would not even got to the court.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right?
It's been so, yeah, they've been so blatant and brazen about what they've done that it's caught the attention of the international community, and they couldn't just keep silent over it. Although I would say they haven't done more anything close to enough. You're right. Israel are embarrassed by this, and in fact, they've, Ben Gvir, is he the interior minister or one of the ministers
Yeah,
in the government, a high position. He basically said that the South Africans going to the ICJ is anti-Semitism, because for them, any some sort of criticism of the state, they view as anti-Semitism, right?
that's
So,
what I'm saying. So the fact that it even got there in the first place,
yeah,
people are surprised, thinking,
they are, yeah,
of the
and
tides, is the tide, is the tide
turning,
turning, as they say.
yeah, 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 and I think the other way to view it as well is that our bar for victory, our bar for a, a solution or victory is so low, right? Because this shouldn't be our bar for victory. Victory for us should be very clear. We should have a clear vision of what the victory is, right? And that's the liberation of Palestine, right? Anything short of that is not a victory. Despite, there might be a change, and like you said, it may be viewed as the tide is turning, but actually, if it doesn't achieve the objective, achieve what we want as an ummah, then that is no victory. So yeah, in terms of how the ICJ ruling is in line with American interests. Essentially, the video that I did goes into each of the 6 verdicts and recommendations that came out of the ruling, and I explain how each and every single one of them is in line with the American plan to pressurize Israel, right? So, like I said, this is about pressurizing the Israeli right-wing government and basically try to bring them in line. However, key point, it doesn't call for a halt in the fighting, and that's the key thing, isn't it? America has never called for a halt in the fighting because they've never backed a ceasefire, right? So that shows that no, America doesn't want a halt in the fighting, because a halt in the fighting really justifies or basically negates the view that Israel had a right to defend itself, right? It essentially says what they've been doing is wrong, right? And America doesn't want to say that. So that ruling itself, the fact that it didn't go as far as a ceasefire, again, is in line with the American plan. So going through the 6 outcomes or verdicts. Number 1, Israel must take all measures within its power to prevent the act of genocide. You had 15 votes to 2, right? Number 2, Israel must ensure the military does not commit acts of genocide, 15 to 2. And number 3, Israel must take all measures within its power to prevent or punish incitement of genocide, and that was 16 votes to 1. So just taking these 3 first, because they're very similar. Well, number 1 and 2 is, and number 3 is slightly different, but essentially what it's saying here with these 3 things, to put it into plain English, they're saying that Israel can continue in its onslaught, can continue in its killing and murderous campaign that it has already been doing. However, they need to ensure that they don't commit genocide, nor call towards genocide. They can't incite towards genocide, right? It's not saying that Israel has committed genocide or is committing genocide, nor is it saying that Israel needs to stop committing genocide. It's not. It's all it's saying is that they need to make sure that they don't commit genocide, as though they haven't been. In a way, I know they haven't ruled yet on that, and that will take years to rule. This is just an interim ruling. But in a way, these points I've just mentioned is in a way saying that actually Israel hasn't committed genocide. Do you get what I'm saying? Because otherwise it would have said Israel needs to stop committing genocide. What they're saying is Israel must take all measures to prevent genocide. Don't let it happen, right?
I mean, those points are kind of pointless.
They're pointless. They're
And the
pointless.
reason
Yeah,
why is because A, it's already been happening. But okay, fair enough, because they
yeah,
haven't passed a ruling. However, you would say
yeah.
that to anybody, don't commit
Exactly.
genocide.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, yeah,
like,
exactly.
but what I would see then, if looking into this a bit, because remember, let's join 2 things together. So there's this call that, yo guys, don't commit genocide.
Yeah,
Pretty obvious. However, the ruling will take a couple of years, right?
yeah, yeah,
And I'm sure we'll talk about the legitimacy of ICJ and stuff like
yeah,
this
yeah,
later. However, if you think about it, could you not think that this is like warning shots being fired? That
yeah,
the fact that if this regime doesn't start towing the line that the Americans want it to, that ruling could end up as being genocide.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. There are warning shots, and they're basically saying, be careful, right? Be careful of what you're doing. Don't Make sure you do not um, basically incite towards genocide and make statements of that are genocidal, because they have been doing that. The point is they have been doing that, right? You've been seeing it from many members of the Knesset and the members of Parliament that have basically been saying that, we are going to basically wipe out the Palestinians. We've seen Ben Gvir say it, we've seen Smotrich say it, we've seen lots of the ministers say it, and some of them have actually been called out as well, that they can't be saying this because it gives the evidence that there wasn't an intent for genocide, right, and an ethnic cleansing. So you're right, it doesn't achieve. They are kind of like warning shots that be careful, right? Otherwise, that this could happen when down the line, the 2 years, 3 years, or however long it takes. However, the third one that we just mentioned about Israel must take all measures within its power to prevent or punish incitement of genocide is funny, because it's basically saying, carry on, do what you're doing, the killing, just do it a bit quietly, and make sure you don't go towards that extent of genocide, nor call towards anything that comes across as incitement towards genocide, because that's what they've been doing. That's fully in line with the American stance, right? For how long has Biden and Kirby and all the Congress members, they've been saying that Israel needs to, Israel, when they ask them, is Israel committing genocide, or does Israel need to stop what it's doing? They say, no, Israel has a right to defend itself. However, it must act within international law, meaning don't commit genocide, which is the act that they've been taken to the ICJ on. So this is in line with the American stance. This is no different to what they've been saying.
Because basically it puts them in a pickle. It puts them in a
Absolutely
difficult situation because
does.
on one side, they've got to show their unwavering, unequivocal support.
Yeah,
And then on the other side, you got these guys talking about human animals and we're going to do this. But they're like,
yeah,
wait a minute. Like, look, because if you continue doing this and we're giving you full support, which is obviously the case and is known,
yeah,
then what does that mean about us? Hence why, I think someone called Joe Biden Genocide Joe.
yeah. Genocide Joe. Yeah, that's his nickname.
Because
Yeah,
there's a link. Because if you think a genocide is happening here because
yeah,
of what
yeah,
these guys are saying and
yeah.
doing, but just say what they're saying specifically, and then you got someone backing them, what's the conclusion?
Absolutely, yeah. And there's already people saying that they're going to be taking those who support Israel to court as well, because they're basically allowing it. They're enabling genocide. So that makes them just as bad, right? So yeah, absolutely. This stance of basically warning shots towards Israel, it's all about keeping them in line, as the US has trying to, like I said, to save itself, because you're going to do so many these acts that won't give you a chance, and there's going to have to be action taken against you. So my argument is that these first three are all in line with the American stance. It has been all along the way. It doesn't go towards a ceasefire or a halt in the fighting. Again, in line with what America has been saying, right? All of this is in line with the American stance. So that again tells you that. So moving on to for number four, which is essentially um, Israel must ensure humanitarian assistance to Gaza. This is an interesting one, because some people have said that whilst the ruling hasn't called towards a ceasefire, the rulings itself will require a ceasefire, right? And this is the main one that they've used to say that, well, in order to get humanitarian aid towards Gaza, you need a ceasefire. So indirectly, it's calling towards a ceasefire. I would hasten to differ on that. I'd differ on that, because um, just because firstly ICJ calling for it, recommending it's a recommendation, they don't need to do it, so that doesn't demand a ceasefire in that firstly, right? Israel don't need to follow any of these, right? That's the first thing. Secondly, that they will claim that humanitarian aid is getting towards Gaza, right? Even though it's very limited, they'll say, well, we've allowed a few trucks and stuff to go in, and there's been a few, so they could argue even it's minimal that this has been happening. Again, goes in line with what America has been saying, right? So America has said, essentially, you can kill them, you can do what you're doing, carry on, but make sure that you have opportunities for aid to get in, right? And that's why you saw, when there was demands for a ceasefire from their populations, from even the UN, and they vetoed it, right? The ceasefire. What did America say? What did Britain say? They said, we don't support a ceasefire. We don't, because this would be this would be a seize in trying to remove Hamas, is basically what they're saying. We don't support that. However, we do we do support the concept of a humanitarian pause, right? So again, to allow humanitarian aid to get in. So is this not in line with that ruling, number 4? Israel must ensure humanitarian aid gets towards Gaza. This is fully in line with what America has been saying all along, right? So again, I would suggest that even number 4 is in line with the American agenda. So number
Even
5.
I would even add to that to say that at the moment, the way the Zionists have been playing the game, they're not just relying on their bombs to kill
No.
people in Gaza. They're relying on the
Yeah.
disease. They're relying on
Starvation.
hunger, starvation, right? Which is
Yeah.
what they're doing. People are starving right now. People are
Yeah.
starving
Yeah.
right
Yeah.
now. Lack of medicine, right? Because remember, humanitarian aid isn't just food. Humanitarian aid is going to be medicine as well. So all of
Absolutely.
these things, right? From the American point of view, if it wants a two state, it actually needs humans to be living in those states, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So at the end of the day, that aid comes in, it helps those people in that respect. But
Yeah.
also another thing as well, going back to the issue of the West and the US giving their unequivocal support, is because this is like some medieval like siege style where you starve people, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So the Western world and the international community and all these concepts have been taking a lot of slack lately, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Where are the human rights? Where are the freedoms? It's taking a lot of slack.
Yeah.
So they have to be seen as, to kind of like get people's
Have some
trust back
humanity.
into this
Yeah.
institution. They have to
Yeah.
show some humanity that, look, I need to feed these
Yeah.
people, then go and bomb them if you want to.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
let them have a biscuit or two, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. They have, yeah, an element they need to give us, so show that they have some heart within them, that they care about, and that's what it's crocodile tears, not even tears. I say tears. They're not crying for Palestine. They don't cry for our children, right? But they do have to say some sort of statements towards our, it's a dire situation. We need to allow them to get aid and stuff like this, as though it matters whether someone has a full stomach and gets bombed. I'm not saying that they're not starving to death and they would want, I'd love for them to have as much food and water as possible, but the reality is that that isn't the problem. The problem is the fact that they're being occupied and they're being bombarded and massacred, right, despite having food or not, right? So again, yeah, you're right, they need to show some sort of humanity. And even like you said, that genocide isn't just through bombing and shooting and killing. Genocide can also be through other ways of death. And I heard a video, I was watching a video, I think for real or something, where someone was saying that if you took someone and left them in the middle of a desert without any food, water, or anything, someone might argue you haven't killed them, you've just left them there, they're alive, right? But the fact that you've created a situation where they have no food, water, you've killed them. You've killed them, right? No one's going to deny that you've killed them. And that's exactly what Israel is doing to the people of Gaza, that they're either shooting them, killing them, or they're starving them to death, right? Or disease. So every way possible, they are basically massacring the people of Palestine, right?
And
And
actually,
I
just
did,
just just to add that this is not any sort of like conspiracy theory. I can't remember the guy's name, but there was an Israeli. I'm not sure whether he was just someone in the military, an ex-military guy, or someone in the
yeah,
government. But basically, I can't remember the exact words, but I did record a podcast, a TikTok on this, where he
yeah,
basically what he was saying, if I'm going to paraphrase, is the fact that you know this disease is good for us because
mm,
it's going to kill a lot of the people. It's going to do our job for us, and that was clear. That was blatant.
yeah, subhanallah.
So it's not this isn't something which we're just making up.
No, no, not at all.
Again, these thick people,
Yeah,
because of their arrogance, just say what they want because they just think no one can do anything to them and no one can say anything against them, and they just say it as it is without being a bit political.
yeah, 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 absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. They're so brazen, so arrogant that they'll just say it as it is. You saw the video of that, the guy talking about, I've killed, how many children he's killed. You saw the video. They've made like music videos and stuff about them committing genocide. You saw the video. There's that guy who I think it's like Amigal or something, where they talk. He's a Palestinian brother. He's talking to other Israeli youth, and they're basically saying, "Yeah, I killed this many kids today, or this many Palestinians today. So what? right? Basically, you can see that it's within them. They have this hatred and dehumanization of the Muslims and Palestinians, right? So this is all out there to be seen, right? And this is coming from the top as well. It's not just a certain portion of the people. So yeah, so that number four again, I'd say, Israel needing to provide humanitarian assistance, and is what America has been saying as well. That doesn't go against what America has been saying. They've said that from day one as well. And then the final one of in terms of actions, number five is Israel must prevent the destruction of allegations of acts of genocide. I mean, that's funny because that's basically saying, well, if you do commit genocide, make sure you don't destroy the evidence of you committing genocide because obviously we need to prove it. So it's just a bit of a, these rulings, what are they? And then the final one is that Israel needs to report back to the court within 1 month. So all in all, and many have said it, the way I view this ruling is that they've said carry on with your onslaught, carry on with your killing, but just be a bit careful, do it a bit slowly, do it a bit under the radar. Don't call out and make your TikToks and your videos about why your intent to commit genocide, and then you're all good. Carry on, and then report back to us within 1 month, and we can see how you progressed against these verdicts. That's my take on it, and I think, like you said, this fully goes in line with the American stance, the American plan, the American, their interests for that region, which is basically to pressurize Netanyahu, pressurize the right-wing government, to allow for the plan for Palestine, which is a two-state solution. So they're using this as a pressure point, really, rather than it really meaning anything more than that.
Well, I mean, in reality, there's hundreds of Muslims in Gaza being killed since Friday,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So it hasn't,
174, wasn't it?
yeah, it hasn't made a difference in that respect. But I think ultimately what we're seeing here is political games being played, and it's the Muslim blood that's being shed, for political agendas. I
Yeah,
think ultimately that's what we're seeing, and I think, to be honest with you, what we see is, some people have described it in the past as being a father and don't really want to say the word, but father and child,
child. Yeah,
illegitimate child relationship, right? Where sometimes the illegitimate child kind of like throws his dummy at the pram and tries to do his own thing, and it needs a bit of
yeah,
a few slaps here and there. So ultimately what we're seeing is that there is resistance from the Zionist side, from the current regime, definitely from the current regime, in regards to pushing forward with what America wants as a final outcome. And one of the reasons, and a massive reason, is because Netanyahu knows the moment this
yeah.
fighting stops,
Um,
he's gone, and that's why they're talking about a possible invasion of South Lebanon.
yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
because this guy wants to escalate things. He wants this to continue. He probably even wants to drag the US to get involved from a military point of view, even if he could, just
yeah,
to prolong it. And I think ultimately, right now, what's challenging for the US is this isn't just a case of one man called Bibi Netanyahu.
no,
It's not even a case of a far right religious element in the government that's holding it in place. In fact,
no,
the people in the state of Israel, from the right, from the middle, from the left, all aspects of society right now are 100%. I'm talking about majority here, right?
yeah,
Obviously,
yeah,
there's
yeah,
going to be a few people who want to
yeah,
call for ceasefire. You get these fringe demonstrations, and then they get
yeah,
slapped
yeah.
up here and there, right, by the police and other people. But the people themselves are behind what's happening. They want
Absolutely,
revenge,
they do.
right? You see it in these videos. You see, and for these are normal people who, are saying things which are just so inhumane, like killing
Yeah.
babies and stuff like that. It's like, how could you even think that? But these are normal people. So
Mhm.
right now, we see this struggle between, the US, the Biden regime, and within Netanyahu and his regime. But at this moment in time, what we're seeing is resistance from Netanyahu. Why? Because he knows, first of all, that his neck's on the line, but also he knows that
People are behind him.
people are in favor of
Yeah,
what he's
yeah,
doing.
yeah, yeah.
They're
They
in
are.
favor of Palestinians being massacred left, right, and center. So why would he just stop it? It's probably a great opportunity to do what they should have done in 1948,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
So I think that's important as a backdrop. And what I would say, just to add to what you're saying, is that I think this ICJ case is being used as a stick to try to bring the Zionists, Netanyahu, into line to say, look, at the end of the day, if you continue doing this, if you don't follow, our official line, then, you could be sent to the Hague,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
right?
Basically, yeah, yeah,
But in regards to it doing anything for the people of Gaza, well, it's in evidence just to see the fact that they passed this ruling on Friday and hundreds and hundreds have died. In fact, there's now checkpoints in Han Yunis, right?
yeah,
It's like
yeah,
these guys are now, what they're saying, they are doubling down now. When they're talking about we're going to have a military presence here, you can see them now trying
yeah,
to create that reality on the ground. They're setting up checkpoints. They're building that 1 kilometer buffer zone in the north, right?
yeah, yeah,
So there's a big tussle going on.
yeah,
So,
yeah, absolutely.
going back to your point, you can see how um, this ruling actually is in line with what America has been pushing in order
Yeah,
to try to direct this war, not stop it, direct it
yeah,
into a way where it achieves its objectives.
yeah, absolutely. The other way to look at it as well is, even though Israel killed 174 after the ruling, they didn't go against the ruling because the ruling didn't say stop the killing. The ruling said don't do genocide. They'll claim that that's not genocide. You know, because it's such a high bar. Genocide is quite a high bar. They need to basically prove that there's intent to kill as well, and also to fully wipe the people out. Because their claim, obviously, we know they're not doing this. We can see it. Their claim is, oh, it's collateral damage, human shields. You know, they're actually said that the other party, the resistance, are the ones that have that intent to do genocide, right? But we don't, because actually, what we're trying to do is we're trying to get the militants and the militants are using the civilians as human shields, and as a result they die. That's their position. So one of the other things to note is that this is also about keeping the credibility of the ICJ, because if they had said do a ceasefire and you're demanded to halt, right? And to be fair, the resistance said they would halt, they'd go in line, and like, before the ruling came out, they said whatever comes out, we're ready to follow what they say, right? That was the resistance, not Israel, right? Israel actually said no, we'll carry on what we're doing, despite any of the rulings. So the other point to note is that if the ICJ had said halt the fighting and commit to a ceasefire, and then Israel didn't, it basically would show up the ICJ, because the ICJ has no power to stop. It's not enforceable. It's not enforceable. So they would not be able to enforce them to do a ceasefire, right? You'd have to go through different routes and stuff like that. America would still have veto and things like that. But yeah, it would be difficult for them because it'd be like ICJ saying one thing, US doing another. But what I'm trying to say is that part of me feels like it's also about protecting the credibility of the ICJ, which it doesn't have much credibility, as we've seen from this. The fact that it was presented a what does it call it? A closed case, or what do you call it when it's like open shut case, closed case, meaning it's compelling. They were presented that, but still it couldn't call for the halting the fightings. That tells you everything about the ICJ and what it's real. It has no teeth. It has no teeth, right?
But what it tells you is, and this is where I want to kind of like move slightly
Yeah,
into what our expectations should be, because if you think about it, when we're talking about the US influencing ICJ, UN, and stuff like that, I mean, for years we've been saying UN equals US, right?
yeah,
But
yeah,
if you think about it, when the issue with Russia happened with Ukraine,
yeah.
the ICJ actually they passed the ruling that the Russians must stop,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah,
Most obviously the Russians didn't. And okay,
yeah,
you could argue, oh, that shows a lack of teeth. That's fine. Okay, but
yeah,
what the point I want to point out is at that time, whose interests
Yeah,
was it in, right?
exactly, exactly.
To show Russia in a bad way, where the ICJ is saying stop and they're saying, nah, mate, we're going to continue. Who looks bad
Yeah,
there? Okay, the
yeah.
ICJ
Russia
looks
looks
like it's
bad.
got
Yeah,
no teeth, but it doesn't claim to have teeth.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But who looks bad? Who looks the
Good
genocidal
point.
maniac, right?
Good
Who looks
point.
like
Good
the
point.
genocidal maniac? Who benefits from it is the US. In
Yeah,
this
yeah, yeah.
case, and this is what I'm saying, listeners and the people watching, just think about it. What's difference in this case? The ICJ, and to be honest with you, you read South Africa's,
Yeah,
case, it was compelling, right? On
yeah,
based on all that evidence, right? And everything, even those judges must be watching on TV, right? I'm sure they watched it on TV, right?
yeah.
They never said stop the fighting, right?
Exactly, exactly.
Two things. A, okay, someone could argue, well, if they did it, the credibility goes because
Yeah,
they're gonna teeth to follow it through.
enforce it.
But
Yeah,
that's what happened in Russia. So that's
true.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, it,
true.
it doesn't look good, but it's not the end of the world. However, the US don't want this to stop.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a really good point because, like you said, that if Israel had defied the ICJ ruling, say it called for a ceasefire, then Israel looks bad because it's like the international community has ruled against you, yet you're carrying on. Whereas that happened with Russia, didn't it? Russia carried on. So it made, and they do that with Russia. They make them look like the bad guy. I'm not saying I support Russia. I'm not. I don't, especially after what they did in Syria. But what I'm trying to say is the ICJ and the institutions and tools that they have to their disposal is not international and it's not universal as they try to claim. These institutions were set up by the West, right? They're colonial institutions, they're Western institutions there to serve a purpose, right? And that purpose is the agenda of the West. So my point and the whole part of the discussion we're having is that even the ruling itself demonstrates that this institution is a Western institution following the pathway of the Western interests and the US interests, right?
So before we bring the episode to a close, because I think, to be honest with you, quite clearly, I think you've put a good case like the South Africans did in regards to defending what your view was, right? But I was just thinking in regards to maybe we talk a little about, or I want to get your views on, this whole issue of these institutions, international law, international community, and as Muslims, what our view should be. And just before I come to that, you were talking before about genocide and okay, 174 people got killed, but
Yeah.
that's not, the
Intent.
threshold for
Yeah.
genocide is high and stuff like that, right? However, the messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the beloved, he said that a drop of Muslim blood is more worthy, more precious than the Kaaba and its surroundings, right?
Yeah.
So to us, 174 is a huge number, even one is a huge number, right? So even these institutions, but even their terminologies of genocide, right?
Yeah.
Just say we establish that they committed genocide. Ultimately, whether they killed 100 or they killed 2 million,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's bad, right? So I think sometimes we even get caught up with this, this genocide. They
Yeah.
say it's genocide, it's a victory for us. But look,
Yeah.
those people still got killed, those sisters
Exactly.
still got raped.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's still orphans out there. They've even got a new. I can't even remember it now. There's even a new
Terminology.
new. That's right, about children, like
Yeah, yeah,
children,
yeah.
orphan
Children
children.
without, yeah, without parents or whatever. Yeah, I forgot what it was.
Yeah, it's kind of
Is a
crazy, right?
yeah, yeah,
This is the case. So even like this issue of the genocide and the definition of genocide, and maybe I'll do a podcast on this. If you
yeah,
think it's a good idea, drop it in the comments about what's the Islamic stance on genocide. Like, do we even have this, like, a theory of
concept.
this,
Yeah,
a
yeah,
concept of genocide, or is murder just murder and violence is
yeah,
violence and that sort of stuff?
yeah. To be fair, it's really interesting you said that because that's exactly what went through my head that why are we so hung up on trying to prove it's genocide? Like we know they are, but the point is not that they're committing even if they weren't committing genocide, they just fell short of it and they were just killing hundreds, whatever it may be. What they're doing is bad, and they're occupying the land. Say they were killing no one, and it was just occupation. Even that is not what we want, right? We want the liberation of that land. So I do agree that this whole case and everything has got us to really think about how do we prove that Israel is committing genocide? The point is they are, and it's beyond proof. But we shouldn't really be focusing or putting all our eggs in there. The point is what they're doing is atrocious, right? It's horrendous for them against the Muslims, right? And we really need to think about how do we change that situation, right? Not focus just on genocide, because yeah, like you said, they'll find loopholes, right? They'll find ways to explain, and that's what they've done. They've explained it away. So they're going to continue to do that, and their institutions will continue to do that, right? Explain it away for them because they control the narrative, right? The good thing is that people are now seeing through that narrative. The masses, not only Muslims, the masses are also seeing the fact that, wow, look what these guys are doing, and look at our governments that are supporting these genocidal maniacs, right? They're really questioning, and I've seen that from non-Muslims as well. I'm sure you have. They're really questioning the status quo, the things they used to put trust and belief in. They're really like, wow, this system that has been enforced on us is not on the right side of history, right? These people are not on the right side of history. I was watching a video about this children, parents asking their children, oh, let's go Starbucks. There's a new flavor out, and the children were like, but we can't go Starbucks because they're supporting Israel, and the money's gonna go there. And the good thing is that the children themselves and in the comments, some people are saying, "Oh, this is brainwashing, and this is, they shouldn't be politicized and stuff like that." But the point is that no, teaching your children that killing is wrong and genocide is wrong is not brainwashing. It's
Mm.
basic parenting, right? So, they can say that, yeah, but we can see that, a lot of the non-Muslims, a lot of Muslims en masse are on the right side, and they can see that what's happening is clearly wrong, and the governments are supporting it. So not only is the blood on the hands of Israel, but it's on the hands of the likes of the US and the UK and Canada and other nations that are supporting Israel.
Yeah, man. Like Loki said, when the British government points their finger at me, all
Yeah,
I can see is the blood at the end of the
dripping.
finger, right,
Yeah,
dripping. So, bro, before we end, I just want to get your thoughts on then from as an advice for Muslims, because like I said, as at the start of the podcast,
yeah,
it was disappointing that people are disappointed. But you see that I think I'm not knocking anyone. We are, when you have desperate times, people just want to cling
yeah,
on to whatever possibility they, any ray of light, any hope, they want to
yeah,
just
yeah,
cling on to it, right? But from the point of view from a Muslim, and you have this international setup, what should our view be? Would you say it's obvious now? Do you think there's still Muslims out there who are still putting their trust into avenues and places where
yeah.
it should not be put into those places?
Yeah, I think unfortunately there will still be people that are wanting to go through the system, go through their own Western institutions to bring about change. And the reason I say that is because what's happening here and with the ICJ, and this is not the first time, right? How many UN resolutions have come about that Israel just have defied and not followed, right? Countless, countless UN resolutions that just not been followed, right? And America or these nations have vetoed and things like that, meaning that even when the UN come to a resolution, Israel doesn't follow, right? So even if the ICJ said ceasefire, they wouldn't follow. So the point I'm trying to say is that, so should we have any hope and trust in these institutions, even if they got to that stance, will it change the situation? No, right?
You know, I was thinking about this thing as well, JK. Yeah, what you're talking about there is from a point of view of uh,
Practicality.
practicality and the
Yeah, yeah,
reality, right? The reality. And I was actually thinking about it, like what we've discussed, and I would advise people to check out a video which I actually recorded about the ICJ, where one of my 6 reasons as to why it's not going to make any change is the fact that this isn't just an issue about Palestine land.
yeah,
This is a clash of civilizations, right? And what my opinion is, and the way I was coming from, is the fact that these institutions belong to a
yeah,
particular
yeah, yeah.
civilization.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah,
So even from that
yeah,
level,
yeah.
it's like, how could you expect anything from them? You know what I'm trying
Yeah,
to
yeah,
say?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, these are Western constructs, right? The ICJ, the UN, the IMF, the World Bank, these are institutions set up by the West, right? So their decisions, their outcomes will always be in favor of the West, right? So if this is they will, like I said, they will claim International Court of Justice. What does international mean? Western Court of Justice, you could say, yeah, or International Court of Injustice, you could say, right? Meaning there is no justice from these institutions, right? The IMF, these are not universal. These are Western tools to basically hold certain nations down, keep them downtrodden, but make them debt ridden. These, because they're Western created institutions. The ICJ is a UN institution, right? That was created and they're based in The Hague. It was created years ago, like during the World War II, I think it was, where they said we need an international body to kind of be a neutral body for these maybe like conflicts or disagreements between nations.
It replaced a similar version of it,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
which was set up with the League of Nations
League of
after
Nations,
World
yeah.
War II, where the UN came about in replacement for the League of Nations, and then the ICJ replaced,
Exactly.
I think it's the PCIJ, something like this.
Yeah, yeah, PICJ or something like that. Yeah, yeah, exactly. So my point is that they were created by the West, right? And they will always have, as we've demonstrated, the outcomes will always be in line with what the West want. And you've seen these examples that you spoke about, Ukraine and Russia, and this one here now. So we shouldn't have any hope in these things. They will not change anything, and we've seen that. And hopefully, another further evidence is the current one now. Even if people don't see it, I'm hoping that I have the hope that we should kind of wake up to the fact that, look, our change will not occur through these institutions. They're Western backed. I think the other point is that that's not the method of change for a Muslim either. That we shouldn't be seeking change through a system that is corrupt, a system that is fully supporting these occupations and the enemies, right, and the criminals. That the system has allowed them to do what they're doing, right? So we shouldn't really be seeking change through them. It's basically going to it's a bit like lobbying the West lobbying Britain to get rid of Israel or help with the Palestinians. The British created Israel. Why are you lobbying to those who are behind the creation of the entity in the first place? We've got really short-term memories, right? So my point is that this is not a method of change anyway as a Muslim, right? So we shouldn't do it regardless of what we expect from it. We shouldn't do it anyway, right? And one of the things that I was reading after this happened is that, you know, the Palestinian people, what they've gone through and what they've been have had to had to suffer, and they've had people that are resisting to support that. That's where you can say there's an element of victory, that they are the victorious, that they are being shaheed for the land, they're being going shaheed for the Muslims, right? That's where the victory lies. It's through the Muslims and what the Muslims have done for the sake of Islam. They didn't go to ICJ when they were trying to fight off the occupiers from their land, and they didn't go to international institutions. They'd fought because they realized that we can't accept this, right? And many of them died as a result. They, in the eyes of Allah, they're going to be seen as the ones who are victorious, right? Yeah, that's victory in one essence, right? The second thing is that we have to recognize what kind of change we want to see. Is it just a ceasefire that is enough of a change? Does that solve the issue of Palestine? It doesn't, right? A ceasefire is not the solution. The solution is the liberation of Palestine. Removing the occupation is what a victory is, right? So every time we think about a solution and change, we need to go back to that vision of liberating Palestine, allowing them to live freely, right? So that's the lens that I would apply to this. And like you said, don't hope for change and a solution from institutions that are Western in the first place.
Subhanallah, bro. Subhanallah. And just to kind of like add to that, the saying of Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, that it was through Islam that we gained izzah, honor.
Mm.
And if the Muslims look to anything other than Islam for honor, they will receive nothing but humiliation and
Yeah.
dishonor. And I think that's what we're seeing. Um, Ultimately, the people on the ground, like you said, in fact, the Muslims in Palestine, they have learned some of their lessons. They have learned the lessons of 1948, right? When they were told to kind of leave and then they'll come back to their lands, and this was just a false promise, or they were told by certain regimes in the region, let us go in and fight, you just move out, you know, in the same way they probably the Zionists were hoping that we're going to put these people through so much misery that they will run through Rafah,
Yeah.
right? It's not happened. They said, listen, it happened to us already once in 1948, in 1967,
Yeah.
in 1958. This is not going to happen again.
Yeah.
We'd rather die on this land than to become refugees again. So they've learned a lesson, but the reality is that it's the wider ummah that needs to learn these lessons
Yeah.
sooner than later, inshallah ta'ala. So,
Yeah.
bro, on that note, I want to bring the podcast to a close. Jazakallah khair. I think
Barakallah.
that you've made all your points clearly, and I hope that inshallah we can, you know, start some discussion in the comments fields, and I'm sure some people will agree, some people will disagree, and it's healthy to have discussions, and hopefully you'll be around to maybe even respond to people who
Yeah.
question your logic and your the way you're doing things. But as usual, what I will do is before I leave you, is just to get our guests' final thoughts if there are any.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as you said, just to reiterate, I think the people of Gaza, the children of Gaza, the adults, the men, the women, the innocent civilians that are passed away, they've really taught us a lesson in sabr, what truly what sabr means. They've taught us a lesson in tawakkul, reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they don't rely on anyone else, right? Because they've seen, like you said, they've seen that the Western world, not just the world in its entirety has abandoned them. So they have looked to Allah for support and assistance, and they only seek assistance and reliance on Allah. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, if Allah should aid you, no one can overcome you, right? And if he should forsake you, then there's no one who can aid you after that, after him, right? And upon Allah let the believers rely. And truly, the people of Palestine have shown they are the believers that rely on Allah. They've shown it, right? We say it. Have we shown it? So what I would say is really we need to rely on Allah, and reliance on Allah and tawakkul. I did this in a podcast, not a podcast, on a khutbah, that reliance on Allah, tawakkul, is not just about the what we say, nor is it just about having that hope that Allah will change something. Reliance on Allah is also relying on what Allah has given us as solutions, relying on the solutions that come from the Quran, the solutions that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's also reliance, because you're going through change that Allah has shown you how to change the situation. The Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam has shown you. That is also part of relying on Allah and not relying on the West or democracy or ICJ or any of these things, right? So that would be my final message, really, for all of us to learn from the people of Palestine, including myself, and rely on Allah in His entirety.
Jazakallah khair, brother JK. Always great to have you on. And I hope people listening and watching have benefited from this. And another polite reminder, please, if you haven't, subscribe to the channel and also like this video and share it with family and friends. But on that note, brother JK, Jazakallah khair. And until the next one, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.